Is Lucy Letby the victim of the most horrendous miscarriage of justice? This video goes through the report by Dr Shoo Lee, who has looked at all of this and who is now saying that there were serious failings at the hospital, which NHS managers were reluctant to admit, and so instead, perhaps not fabricated, but enabled this case to go forward against Letby, blaming her for everything that took place because of a poor standard of care to children in the neonatal unit. Hello everyone, this is Andre Walker. Thanks so much for watching this video. Please do subscribe, but more importantly, hit the bell notification icon. It's the best way to absolutely guarantee you get all my videos as soon as they are released. Well, there are people who turn round and say it's distasteful to question the conviction of Lucy Letby. What must the family or families of the victims think? Well, I'm going to say that I don't care what the family of the victims think. The reason is because this woman should not be rotting in prison just because it's offensive to question her conviction if she's innocent. Now, I don't know whether she is guilty or innocent, but what I do know is that this report by Dr Shoo Lee raises some serious problems. Now, I can't work out whether to go through everything that Shoo Lee raised or just summarise it. The reason is, it is a little bit technical. But you know what I'll do? Let's have a stab at going through all of it in order. Now, some of it will involve medical comments, but what you're about to hear is evidence from witnesses who talked about the standard of care in the hospital quite without the whole issue of Lucy Letby. Now, remember something else about Lucy Letby. All of the deaths that took place that were suspicious, she was present for. But that was when the definition of suspicious was that Lucy Letby was present. What? Yes, that's right. The deaths were only considered suspicious if Lucy Letby was present. Those deaths that took place without her present were not considered suspicious as a result of her not being there. It's what's called a truism, and something that raises major concerns because 1/3 of the children that died ended up whilst Lucy Letby was not present. Okay, these are some of the comments from the witnesses. Apparently, there were constantly inadequate number of properly trained personnel in the neonatal unit. Apparently, nursing itself was poorly trained in the hospital. There was inadequate staff. The workload was too much. There was poor plumbing and drainage, resulting in the need for intensive cleaning, which meant that potentially infectious diseases would break out on a regular basis. The temperature was wrong, so in fact bacteria would regularly break out. Doctors were quite hard to come by because junior doctors were running around the hospital and didn't have enough time to spend with patients. It was difficult finding a doctor when problems arise. Congestion at medical cabinets created slowness of treating people. Basically, signing the drugs out took far too long. There was a lack of proper facilities to sterilise items like IV lines. Some high-risk infants who should have been born and cared for in the higher-end institutions were born and cared for in the Countess of Chester Hospital because of shortage of beds at other specialist units. There were delays in transfer of sick infants from the Countess of Chester to other hospitals. Right, so that is just a list of some of the problems. There's also, with some of the patients themselves, they didn't have proper medical histories. They didn't have proper obstetrics organised. There was a disregard of surveillance warnings about infectious diseases breaking out. There was misdiagnosis of diseases on a regular basis. We're not finished here, by the way. Caring for patients that were beyond their designated level of care was a regular thing. That is to say that the nurses looking after these patients were not trained to look after patients at that level. Unsafe delays, I think I've already mentioned that. There were poor skills at resuscitation. So the doctors and nurses weren't properly trained how to resuscitate very sick patients. Obviously, junior doctors were rushed off their feet. I think they mentioned that in the other section. There was a lack of understanding about basic respiratory physiology. Poor management, lack of knowledge, failure to protect high-risk patients, lack of I mean, this list just goes on and on and on. But next, here is the final bit that's important. There is no medical evidence whatsoever that she did anything at all. And remember what was said once, she must have used insulin because that's the only way you could do what she did and there'd be absolutely no evidence she did anything at all. Look, There are alternative explanations for all of this. And of course, as you know, the Countess of Chester Hospital is relatively near to Mid-Staffs, and I bet you all the old relics that were sacked at Mid-Staffs ended up at the Countess of Chester Hospital. Look, I don't know what has taken place here, but I have to say to you, increasingly, it's pretty obvious that the NHS is desperate to cover up its mistakes. I mean, I've heard before today, I remember there was a case at St George's Hospital in Tooting where a bloke was so thirsty, he dialed 999 on his mobile phone. Police came over to give him some water. The nurses turned him away and didn't give him any water, and he later died of dehydration. That is some of the standard of the care that you get. Now, I will admit, the NHS is funny. It's almost like a franchise. So things like regional cancer centres are excellent, whereas geriatric care in local hospitals is often very poor. So things can vary from place to place. But time and time again, what we have seen with the NHS is when they make mistakes, when they fail, when the system itself undermines quality care, we end up attempting to find a scapegoat. And I think that that is potentially what has happened with Lucy Letby. These doctors are running around going, well, I'm so marvellous, it couldn't possibly be my fault. There must be malpractice. Well, okay, but remember, there's always going to be above and below average numbers of deaths. That is the nature of an average. And also what there is also systemic problems. Because let me tell you, this video is not intended to be gratuitous about anything, and I hope you don't feel that I've done that. Here's my point. When Bevan created the NHS, he believed that over time, as public health improved, the need for the NHS would decline and eventually it would almost disappear completely. That's why he overpaid GPs to the extent he overpaid GPs. He said, I've stuffed their mouths with gold. The reality is, he created a system that was extremely dysfunctional. And we are left with that system today. But what we've done successfully is we have persuaded the British public that there are two choices. You either have the Soviet Union NHS that we have at the moment, or you have people not being treated on the streets and being sent enormous bills for their treatment. That is not the two positions. There is a hybrid in between. As an example, in Israel, you pay a small amount, but I think there are something like 2 or 3 NHSs, and you get to pick whichever one you think is the best. And that is something that enables competition and also means that, that poor hospitals are called out and taken to task for doing it. I think it's time that we looked at the NHS in general, because this Letby thing is a case of 17 people and is disastrous for those people concerned. But what is more disastrous is that our NHS has one of the worst survival rates in every category. It is one of the worst performing healthcare systems in the Western world, and we cannot reform it because of the dominance of the trade unions. We've got to do something about that. Something to think about. Until next time, goodbye.